They said that this is an unacceptable attack on women and LGBT, and we need to force them, right? That was the key word. We need to force them to change their views using a diversity of tactics. And we would acknowledge that peaceful protesting is just one tactic, so it seems like they're calling for other things. But
Well,
even
if
that word
they're
force, what is that word force?
Michael, now you're blending. Now you're saying, well, they've used peaceful protesting, but they're calling for other things.
No, but
so they've broken.
That isn't my problem.
In today's video, David Pakman wipes the floor with Michael Knowles in a heated debate. Now, this debate is a little old, it's from 3 years ago, but I believe that what they're discussing is very relevant to what's happening in the world today. From Supreme Court protests, free speech, and the politics of abortion, Pakman methodically exposes how shaky the legal and strategic claims really are. So let's dive in and watch how David Pakman shuts down Michael Knowles in this heated debate.
Can we at least agree this is bad? It is bad to protest outside of Supreme Court justices' homes?
Well, so I suspect you want to have a good faith conversation about this. Is that a fair assessment? So we can speak freely here. You're not just looking to play gotcha here.
I'm not. No, I'm really
okay,
not.
All right,
That's not what we do on the show.
So let's see. This is not a protest technique I would employ, right? But I have a large platform online where I'm going to reach way more people than going to anybody's house. So like my personal thing is this is not a protest technique I would employ. Let's go through like legality, morality, ethics, etc.
Yep.
Anything that is a criminal act like a Molotov cocktail, destruction of property, whatever, it should be reported. If there's a crime, people should be charged. If you can get a guilty verdict, they should be sentenced. Fine. Very, very good.
Yep.
In terms of the speech aspect of this, there's this case from the 90s, Madsen v. Women's Health Center, which found that it's okay for anti-choice protesters to go and protest outside the homes of just random workers at abortion clinics. Okay, now that's not my opinion. That's a decision that exists.
Yep.
Those are quite literally private citizens. They're just like medical workers, right? So if that's okay and we have a First Amendment, certainly showing up and protesting isn't against the law. Are you and I on the same page about that piece?
No, because in the U.S. Code, 18 U.S. Code Section 1507, the federal law, explicitly prohibits protesting outside of the homes of judges with the intention of influencing their decisions. So if
the decision has been done, though.
No, it hasn't. The decision hasn't come out. There was a leaked draft of the opinion. So I would agree with you. It's not clear that they were in violation of the law if the decision had already come out and they were just expressing their anger. But because the decision has not come out, because it seems clear to me that the protesters are trying to change the course of how this decision is going to come and try to bring political pressure, to me it seems quite clear this is a violation of federal law.
No lawyer I've spoken to says that this is against any law unless some specific, if there even something as relatively benign as a noise ordinance, let's say there's a noise ordinance that starts at 10 p.m. Yep. If it's 11 and you're being loud, okay, now we have something to talk about. But that's
not the law that
lawyer who says there's any law being broken.
Michael leans hard on 18 U.S.C. Section 1507, but that statute has an extremely high bar. Prosecutors have to prove specific intent to influence a judge's decision in a particular case. That's not speculation or vibes, that's a legal standard. And historically, the DOJ almost never brings charges under 1507 because intent is nearly impossible to prove without explicit statements like, "We're here to pressure you to rule X in case Y." In fact, legal scholars have pointed out that protests near judges' homes have happened before, including conservative protests during desegregation rulings and same-sex marriage cases, and prosecutors declined to act for this exact reason. Presence alone isn't enough. Timing alone isn't enough. Even proximity isn't enough. Without clear individualized evidence of intent, the First Amendment usually wins. There's also a bigger constitutional backdrop Michael kind of skips over. The Supreme Court has repeatedly ruled in cases like Cox v. Louisiana and Snyder v. Phelps, that speech doesn't lose protection just because it's uncomfortable, targeted, or politically charged. The court has been especially cautious about criminalizing protests based on assumed motives, because that's how viewpoint discrimination sneaks in. If law enforcement starts deciding why people are protesting based on inferred intent, that's a dangerous road. And practically speaking, if protesting near a justice's residence were automatically illegal during pending cases, then any visible expression, signs, chanting, even silent vigils could be criminalized whenever a case is undecided. That would hand the government a veto over protest timing, which courts have consistently rejected. That's why David Pakman's position lands as more grounded. He's not saying the protests are tasteful or effective. He's saying distaste doesn't equal illegality.
That is the law. I mean, the viewers are free to go check it out, but that is a very specific law. There's actually a Virginia statute too, but I'm just talking about the federal law. 18 U.S.C. 1507. You can look it up. Now, you might say, well, I don't like that law. I don't think it's just.
I just
think
don't
it's a
think
violation.
it's applicable here. I just don't think it's applicable at the homes of these individuals in Virginia, based on lawyers I've spoken to. Neither you or I are lawyers, so we may just be.
But I can read the law. I mean,
further.
The statute is plain. Are you saying that you don't think that the protesters are seeking to influence the decision?
I haven't spoken to them, so I really can't say. But
you can hear what they're saying, right?
What's that?
You can hear the sort of things that they're chanting. They're not saying.
I actually have not heard what they're chanting. I have not.
Okay.
I don't know what are they chanting? You tell me.
They're chanting "My body, my choice." They're chanting,
My body, my choice isn't change the decision.
Of course it is.
That's just their opinion, right? My body, my choice.
They're chanting in support of the ruling that will be overruled by the Dobbs versus Jackson Women's Health Organization case.
Listen, I think that if we want to get into the minutia of this at the legal level, I think you would have a hard time arguing that legally saying "my body, my choice" is equivalent to saying "change your decision." So I don't know.
David,
that this is the best path for us.
what would they be doing outside of the justices' homes before a decision comes out, after a leaked opinion?
Expressing their opinion. I mean, listen,
but
legally, I don't think
opinion...
you're going to win on that. I don't think you're going to win on legally they were breaking the law because they said "my body, my choice." It seems very weak.
No, David, they're not merely saying "my body, my choice," and they're not merely posting some opinion online. They're going to the homes of these people. Actually, the group that sent them, it's called Ruth Sent Us, they said that this is an unacceptable attack on women and LGBT, and we need to force them, right? That was the key word. We need to force them to change their views using a diversity of tactics. And we would acknowledge that peaceful protesting is just one tactic, so it seems like they're calling for other things. But even that word force, what does that word force?
Michael, now you're blending, now you're saying, well, they've used peaceful protesting, but they're calling for other things.
No, but
so they've broken.
That isn't my problem. No, I mean, I think that is a separate issue. But the very fact that the organization that sent, I'm sorry.
But you introduced it in this conversation.
That's a problem as well, that they're calling for a diversity of tactics. But the chief problem that we're discussing here is that the organization that is taking responsibility for sending the mobs to the justices' homes says we need to force them to change their minds. We need to force them to not attack women and LGBT and all of the other minority groups that they're discussing. So even the word force would suggest to me that they are attempting to influence the decision and therefore are in violation of this law.
Yeah, I'm not trying to skirt the main point you're trying to make, which I am unsure I can identify, but I haven't seen that specifically said, so it's just hard for me to comment on it. I can
you're pleading ignorance on this point.
No, I'm not pleading ignorance. What I can speak to is, if any crime has been committed, charge them.
Okay.
I'm totally with that.
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense.
Michael keeps circling back to intent, but intent in federal law isn't inferred from vibes, slogans, or proximity. It's proven with evidence. Prosecutors don't get to say, well, clearly they meant X. They have to show concrete, individualized proof that protesters were trying to influence a specific judicial outcome in a specific case. Chanting a political slogan, even a charged one, has never met that bar. And the force argument really falls apart once you look at precedent. Courts have consistently ruled that rhetorical language, even aggressive language, is protected unless it's paired with imminent threats or unlawful action. Groups saying they want to force change through a diversity of tactics doesn't magically convert peaceful protest into coercion. If that were the standard, civil rights protests, labor strikes, and anti-war demonstrations from the last century would all retroactively become criminal conspiracies. That's not how the First Amendment works. There's also a reason no arrests were made under 18 U.S.C. section 1507 here. The DOJ knows how narrow that statute is. Legal scholars have pointed out that the law was designed to stop things like juror intimidation and direct judicial coercion, not expressive protest. In fact, DOJ guidance has repeatedly warned against stretching this statute because doing so risks unconstitutional viewpoint discrimination. Once you start criminalizing why someone is protesting, you're no longer enforcing law, you're policing thought. Michael's reliance on organizational statements also misses another key point. Guilt by association isn't a thing in criminal law. Even if an organization uses sloppy or overheated language, individual protesters are judged on their own actions and speech. Courts don't import a press release into a criminal statute unless there's direct coordination toward illegal acts. Without that, you're just speculating, and speculation doesn't survive constitutional scrutiny.
Do you think now, from your perspective as a reasonable Democrat, if you were advising Democrats?
I'm not a Democrat. I've never been associated with the Democratic Party.
Really? What,
Yeah.
Are you in any party, or you're just independent?
No. Yeah, I'm just independent.
You would generally vote for Democrats, I would assume.
I vote for more Democrats than Republicans. I don't care about parties, though. I see parties essentially almost like corporations that justify their own existence to just continue existing in opposition to the other party.
Do you really vote for Republicans?
I voted for many. There's lots of nonpartisan local elections.
Okay.
Where I later found out some of the people were not Democrats, but I mean, it's kind of neither here nor there.
Okay. So, but you're not formally in the Democrat Party. If you were advising a Democratic candidate, or any candidate for that
Sure.
matter, who is on the left, would you advise them to continue running on this issue of abortion, on this issue of, well, for instance, the bill that the Democrats last night tried to pass, it failed in the Senate. They said it was to codify Roe versus Wade. It actually went further to create even more abortion protections. Would you advise them to run on this issue in the midterms, or to back away from it in the midterms?
So run on it. I think that there's from a political strategy standpoint, there's two options. One would be run on the bill that failed yesterday. That doesn't seem like a good idea to run on that.
Yeah.
I think where there is, based on public opinion about abortion being as in favor of it as ever before during the Roe v. Wade era, public polling is now in the 60-70% of Americans believe abortion should generally be legal in most cases. That's not in every case, but in most cases. Based on that, it seems to me it would be prudent to run on, we need to get the government out of medical decisions between women and doctors. I mean, and again, you and I are never going to agree on something like, when does life begin? That's a different.
We might agree on that. I had a gal who came.
Whoa, hold on. But let me at least finish my sentence.
Sure.
You asked me about strategy. It seems to me that since most Americans think abortion should be legal in most cases, the right strategy thing would be, we need to get the federal government out of in the middle of these medical decisions.
But right now, let's say that the leaked opinion actually ends up being the final decision. Let's say that Roe v. Wade is overruled instantly, as Elizabeth Warren says, abortion is severely restricted, if not outlawed, in more than half of the states. Instantly, you're in a very different situation. Sure. Knowing that there are all sorts of polls. There's polls that show that 94% of Americans reject the absolutist view of abortion held by some Democrats. There are polls, as you cite, that show that when you ask the question, do you support Roe versus Wade broadly, then there is some majority of Americans that broadly want some abortion liberality.
Michael, that's very mealy-mouthed. I mean, let's just be honest. Asked the same way, over the last 50 years, support for Roe v. Wade has continued to go up. Fair?
Well, it depends how you ask the question. If you ask
the same way over the last 50 years,
if you ask
that it has gone up.
If you ask the question in a way that is I think, hiding the reality of abortion and is just talking about the decision, Roe versus Wade, then sure, there's broad support for it. But if you ask the question and you say, do you support this type of abortion? Do you support this type of abortion? Do you support? Then the support is much, much smaller. This is why the bill failed yesterday.
You're creating distinctions only to create doubt, when the point I'm making is, over the last 50 years, generally, overall, should abortion generally be legal in most cases? Support has gone up. You can admit that and still be against it.
When abortion is framed as a government intrusion issue rather than a moral abstraction, support spikes across party lines, including among independents and even a chunk of Republicans. That's not theory. That's straight out of Pew, Gallup, and AP NORC trend data. There's also a reason abortion keeps resurfacing electorally even when pundits say it's a loser. After major abortion restrictions pass, turnout among women and younger voters jumps, sometimes dramatically. Kansas in 2022 is the clearest example. A red state, no partisan framing, and voters rejected abortion restrictions by nearly 20 points. That wasn't because people suddenly embraced abortion absolutism. It was because they rejected politicians making deeply personal medical decisions for them. Michael's attempt to fracture public opinion into edge cases also ignores something campaigns already know. Voters don't cast ballots based on policy footnotes. They vote on threat perception. And when Roe was on the books, abortion felt theoretical to many people. Once it's gone, it's immediate, tangible, and local. Trigger laws, criminal penalties, doctors leaving states, hospitals shutting down OB units. That reality changes how salience works. Even economically, abortion doesn't exist in a vacuum. States with the strictest abortion bans are already seeing higher maternal mortality rates, worse OB/GYN shortages, and increased medical costs. All things voters absolutely do care about when inflation and healthcare are already top concerns. Framing abortion as government out of medical decisions isn't rhetorical sleight of hand. It reflects downstream economic and public health consequences. That's why David Pakman's strategic view makes sense. He's not pretending abortion is the only issue voters care about. He's recognizing that when the government asserts control over intimate medical decisions, it reshapes the entire political landscape. Pause. Are you getting tired of getting half the story from biased news sources? One outlet says one thing and another says the complete opposite. How are you supposed to know what's actually true? That's where ground news comes in. It lets you compare how different media outlets, left, right, and center, are covering the same story. So you can see the full picture instead of just the echo chamber. And here's the best part. Click the link in the description and get 40% off the Vantage tier, which gives you even deeper insights into media bias and political trends. Stay informed, think for yourself, and check out Ground News in the description down below.